My son forged my name to steal my cabin. He never expected me to fight back. My name is Nora Beckett. I turned 74 this past spring, though most mornings I still feel like the young paramedic who once sprinted into burning houses with nothing but a radio and adrenaline. Now, my emergencies are quieter. They're the hum of my kettle, the chirp of the chickadees outside my cabin window, the ache in my knees on rainy days. I live alone up here in Pine Ridge, Colorado, in a place folks call Hummingbird Cabin. It sits on a ridge above Blue Mesa Reservoir where the water flashes silver whenever the wind runs across it. To outsiders, it might look small, even plain. Cedar planks, smoke-stained stone chimney, a tin mailbox that's leaned to one side since the blizzard of '96. But to me, this cabin is marrow. My husband Cal and I built it nearly 40 years ago with our own hands, nails bent from cold fingers, shingles laid in the snow walls, perfumed with pine resin. Cal died a decade ago, a heart attack that came quick while he was fixing a neighbor's tractor. Some nights I still wake reaching for him, only to find the pillow cold. I'm not wealthy. My income comes from Cal's modest pension and the retirement fund I pieced together after 30 years on the ambulance. I don't cruise the Caribbean. I don't shop designer. I stretch my groceries with coupons, and I grow tomatoes in raised beds out back. And yet this cabin is my palace. My rocking chair faces the lake. My shelves sag with paperbacks. And the badge Cal kept from his firehouse sits above the mantel polished every Sunday. For me, peace was enough. At least that's what I believed. I want to pause here and ask you, before I tell you what happened next, have you ever had a place that wasn't just four walls, but a piece of your soul? A home you thought no one could take from you? If you do, you'll understand why what came next nearly broke me. So stay with me. And if you've ever faced family betrayal or had to fight for what's yours, I hope you'll share your thoughts in the comments below. It might just help someone who feels alone right now. The day the knock sounded different, I knew something was coming. Not the UPS guy, not a neighbor with eggs, not the rhythm I'd learned after 20 years in this valley. No, it was clipped, official. When I opened the door, no one was there. Just a white envelope tucked between the frame and the screen. County seal in the corner. Inside was a single-page notice zoning inquiry change of use application. My eyes traced the lines twice. It listed my cabin as the subject property. It referenced short-term rental conversion, something I'd never even considered. At the bottom, in faint ink, my name was typed neatly beside a line for owner's consent, except the signature above it wasn't mine. I felt a chill sweep over me colder than the alpine wind. I placed the paper on the table, smoothed it flat, and stared at the curves of the forged name. My hand didn't shake. Years on an ambulance had taught me to keep still under pressure. But inside, something cracked open. Because if this paper was real, it meant someone close was already making moves to erase me from the very place I'd bled and built for. Later that afternoon, my son Dylan called, cheerful in a way that clanged false. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Just checking in. You keeping warm up there?" I wanted to ask him outright, but instead, I just listened, and in his voice, beneath the smooth notes, I caught it calculation. That night, as the wind rattled the cabin walls, I sat at the table with the notice under a lamp, tracing Cal's fireman badge with one hand and the forged signature with the other. And I whispered, "They don't know who they're messing with." I tried to push the zoning letter out of my mind, telling myself it had to be a mistake. Maybe some clerk typed the wrong parcel number. Maybe some other Beckett lived in town. But deep down, I already knew. And the truth has a way of showing its face whether you're ready or not. A week later, Pine Ridge hosted its monthly neighborhood potluck at the volunteer fire hall. I'd baked my cornbread casserole, the same one Cal used to brag about when the paramedics had long shifts. I wanted normalcy, wanted to hear about calf births and ski conditions, not legal paperwork and forged signatures. The room smelled like chili and apple pies. I set my dish down, hugged Doris from across the road, and felt for a fleeting moment like life could still be ordinary. Then Dylan cleared his throat. He stood near the dessert table, coffee in hand, his arm draped around Sloane's waist. She wore a blazer too sharp for a potluck, hair sprayed into place, like she was selling houses even in her sleep. "We're so glad to see everyone," Dylan began, voice pitched higher than usual. "And we wanted to share some good news about Mom." The clatter of forks paused. Conversations dimmed. I froze, casserole spoon still in my hand. "She's going to be moving soon." Dylan continued, smiling like a politician. "We found a beautiful spot for her at Aspen View Senior Living. It's just 20 minutes down the road. Great staff gardens, even art classes. We thought it was time she had the care she deserves." Every head turned. My ears rang. I hadn't agreed to anything, hadn't even discussed it beyond his "how are you holding up" calls. Yet here he was, announcing my exile like it was a surprise birthday party. "I'm not moving anywhere," I said firmly, but my voice felt small against the hum of whispers rising around me. Sloane leaned in, flashing teeth too white. "She's being modest," she cooed. "We've already started the paperwork. She just doesn't want to brag." A chuckle rippled through the crowd, awkward, uncertain. My cheeks burned. In a community, this small reputation is currency, and they had just painted me as confused, out of touch, incapable of speaking for myself. I left early, casserole untouched, my stomach knotted. When I reached my truck, I pulled at the handle. The lock beeped red. Strange, I never heard that before. At the cabin later that evening, the same thing happened. My key fit into the door, but when I turned it, a mechanical click blocked me out. My own home. I stood on the porch, breath fogging in the cold night. A neighbor walking his dog, slowed concern etched on his face. "Everything okay, Nora?" I forced a smile. Just a sticky lock. But inside, I was shaking. The next morning, I drove into town to get it checked. The locksmith frowned when he inspected the knob. "This isn't your standard deadbolt, Ms. Beckett. Someone installed a smart lock. Needs a code or a phone app to override." I hadn't ordered it. My heart sank. By afternoon, the sheriff's cruiser pulled up outside my cabin. Deputy Carter stepped out, hat tilted low. "Ma'am, we got a call about a welfare check. Reports of you being agitated, maybe confused." I stared at him. "From who?" He hesitated. "Anonymous, but I have to follow up." He walked through my cabin like it was evidence, opened my fridge, glanced at my meds. I knew the drill. I'd been on the other side too many times, but this time it was my dignity under inspection. "You seem fine to me," he finally said, jotting notes. "Take care now." When his cruiser disappeared down the dirt road, I slumped into the rocking chair, pulse thudding in my ears. This wasn't care. It wasn't protection. It was strategy. Each step, public embarrassment, locks, changed authorities summoned, was designed to make me doubt myself, to make the world doubt me too. That evening, I opened my email. A notification blinked, DocuSign, complete quitclaim deed. My breath caught. I clicked, and there it was, legal documents transferring Hummingbird Cabin to something called Beckett Family Holdings, LLC. My name sprawled across the bottom in a signature that slanted, wrong letters, crooked like a stranger's handwriting. I read it 3 times. The tears didn't come, just a numb, icy clarity. I picked up the phone and dialed Dylan. He answered on the 3rd ring, voice smooth, almost rehearsed. "Hey, Mom, what did you do?" I asked, steady. He sighed. "Please don't make this harder than it has to be. You're not safe out there alone. This way everything is secure. It's for your own good." My own good. My knuckles whitened around the receiver. "You forged my name. You locked me out of my own house." "Don't be dramatic," he said, impatient, slipping through. "It's done. The LLC is cleaner for taxes anyway. You'll thank me later." I hung up without another word. For a long time, I sat staring at Cal's badge above the fireplace, its brass catching the lamplight. He had carried people out of flames. He had risked his life to give others another day. And now, his son, our son, was setting fire to everything we'd built together. I wasn't ready to fight back that night, but I knew I couldn't let this stand. The humiliation of that potluck, the lock that barred me the forged signature blinking from my inbox. They weren't just injuries. They were warnings. And warnings in my old line of work meant one thing: you prepare or you perish. The morning after that call with Dylan, I woke before dawn, the cabin still wrapped in silence. For years, I had treated my mornings like a ritual: coffee in my chipped mug, a few pages of a paperback, maybe humming along to the old radio scanner that picked up county chatter. But that morning, I couldn't swallow a sip. The taste of betrayal sat heavy on my tongue. I laid the printed deed out on the table beside Cal's badge like evidence in a case file. My name stolen. My home listed as property of an LLC I'd never heard of. I'd seen enough families wrecked in my paramedic days to know one thing: when people show you their greed, you believe them. Dylan wasn't going to stop. Sloan wasn't going to ease off. They would keep tightening the screws until I either broke or disappeared. I whispered aloud just to hear it in the room. Not me. Not now. Not ever. That was the moment I chose the fight. I knew I needed help, and not the kind wrapped in polite sympathy. Real help. The kind that understands how small towns work, how paperwork can be twisted, how neighbors remember more than they say. So I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Patrice Lund, an attorney who ran a small office above the bakery in Gunnison. Folks said she didn't waste words and didn't scare easy. I left a message on her machine, my voice steady. "This is Nora Beckett. I believe my property deed has been forged. Please call me back." The second call was to my neighbor, Arturo Vega. Arturo used to be a county surveyor before retirement. He had the kind of mind that could measure a slope just by looking at it, and he'd always had a quiet kindness toward me. When I explained what happened, he didn't gasp or fumble. He just said, "Bring the papers by Nora. I'll look at them. And don't lose hope." The third call was harder. I dialed Tabitha Jordan Tab, as everyone called her. Years ago, she had been my EMT trainee, a wiry kid with nervous hands and a quick brain. She'd left the ambulance world for computers, now working as a freelance digital forensics specialist. Last I'd heard, she lived out of a van with Wi-Fi hotspots and 3 rescue dogs. I wasn't sure she'd even answer. But she did. Miss Beckett, her voice crackled through. "Tab," I said, surprised at the quiver in my throat. "I need to know if an electronic signature can be traced. If someone pretends to be me online, can you prove it?" A pause, then a laugh. "That's basically my bread and butter. Send me the file. I'll dig." For the first time in days, my lungs filled all the way. By afternoon, Arturo sat at my table, glasses perched low as he examined the forged quitclaim deed. He tapped the notary stamp with a calloused finger. "See here. This is sloppy. Wrong expiration date. The county doesn't even use this style anymore. And the parcel description, it's missing the conservation overlay. That's not just fraud, that's lazy fraud." He pulled out a folder from his leather satchel edges, frayed from years of use. Inside was an old survey map from the early 80s. He unfolded it, slowly spreading it across my kitchen like a treasure map. When this land was first divided, there was talk of a conservation easement. Your lot was listed as provisional. It might mean nothing, but it might mean everything. If an easement was ever filed, they can't flip this place no matter what. I leaned over the map, tracing the faded ink. The lines of my land curved like a shield hugging the ridge. For the first time, I saw my home not just as memory, but as leverage. That night, Tab called back. "Got it," she said. "The DocuSign you received?" The IP address logs back to a salon in Denver. Guess whose Wi-Fi was used? Your daughter-in-law's name is on the account. I closed my eyes, a grim smile tugging at my mouth. So it wasn't even subtle. Not at all, Tab said. I'll draft a report and keep recording every conversation. The more breadcrumbs, the stronger the case. I slid the small voice recorder Patrice had given me into my knitting basket. She'd called earlier, her voice calm but clipped. Don't tip your hand yet, Nora. Keep your routine, keep smiling, but document everything. When the time comes, we'll make sure the judge sees the truth. So that's what I did. The next few days, I played the part of an ordinary old woman. I watered the tomatoes, waved to neighbors on their morning jogs, and lingered at the post office counter chatting about the weather. But beneath the surface, every step was calculated. The cabin had become a war room, folders stacked with copies of deeds, sticky notes mapping out dates and calls, Arturo's survey map pinned to the wall with Cal's old firehouse tax. I caught myself chuckling one night, the kind of laugh that comes from nerves and grit all tangled together. Who would have thought at 74 I was running an operation tighter than some of the paramedic shifts I used to lead? But it wasn't adrenaline pushing me now. It was something deeper. Dignity. Memory. The simple, unshakable truth that no one, not even my own blood, had the right to write me off and steal the place where my life still had roots. I wasn't just defending a cabin. I was defending the last piece of Cal, the years of calloused hands, the meals shared at this same table, the laughter of neighbors echoing off these walls. And if Dylan thought I'd roll over quietly, he had forgotten whose daughter I once was, whose wife I had been, and what I had carried people through in my life. The fight had begun. And this time, it wasn't about emergencies that lasted minutes. It was about a battle that might stretch for months. But I was ready. The trouble didn't take long to find me. Trouble never does not when someone else is busy setting the stage behind your back. 3 mornings after Tab confirmed the forged signature, I walked into town to cash a small check from the food co-op where I still volunteered. The teller, Marlene Sweetwoman, who always complimented my scarves, gave me a look I'd never seen before. Half pity, half discomfort. She slid the check back across the counter and whispered, I'm sorry, Nora. Your account's been flagged. Temporary freeze. I blinked. Flagged for what? She lowered her voice. Family guardianship claim. We got paperwork saying your son is primary custodian for your finances pending review. The room swayed. Marlene reached for my elbow, steadying me. I wanted to shout that it was fraud, scream it loud enough for everyone in the bank to hear, but I could feel the eyes of neighbors already darting toward me, whispers rising like a tide. I forced my lips into a smile and said, Of course. Just a mix-up. I'll handle it. I walked out with my check still folded in my pocket, each step echoing like betrayal across the marble floor. Dylan and Sloan weren't just after the deed, they were cutting off my lifeline. That afternoon, a knock rattled the cabin again. This time, it was Elder Services clipboard in hand, 2 women in fleece jackets who looked like they'd stepped out of a brochure. They spoke in soft voices, too soft, like I was a skittish animal. We just need to make sure you're taking your medication on time. Do you ever forget to eat meals? Do you feel unsafe at home? I wanted to slam the door. Instead, I let them in. They peeked at the pantry, scribbled notes about the expired milk carton I hadn't tossed, yet even asked me to recite the date. When they left, one patted my hand. Don't worry, Mrs. Beckett. If you need help, we'll make sure you get it. The patronizing sting stayed long after their SUV pulled away. They didn't see me. They saw a file, a number, a potential liability, and Dylan knew it. He was painting me into a corner stroke by stroke. The very next day, I came home from the library to find a strange car parked in the drive. A man with a camera tripod was snapping photos of my cabin. Another woman carried a clipboard murmuring about staging potential. What do you think you're doing? I demanded, climbing out of my truck. The woman barely glanced up. "We're with Summit Realty, here to prepare the listing. You must be the seller." My heart dropped. "I'm the owner, and I didn't hire you." They exchanged glances, already packing up like they'd been caught shoplifting. The man muttered, "Paperwork says otherwise." Then they drove off, gravel spraying under their tires. I stood in the yard, fists clenched. My cabin, the place Cal and I had built nail by nail, was being photographed like a commodity. They were trying to erase me before the ink had even dried on their lies. That night, the weather turned. A snowstorm barreled down from the peaks, shrieking through the pines. By midnight, the power cut out. Darkness swallowed the cabin, except for the glow of the old oil lamp on my table. Most people my age would have panicked, but I'd lived through worse. I trudged to the shed, wind slicing my cheeks, and cranked up the generator. Its rumble shook the silence lights, flickering back to life. As the kettle hissed on the gas stove, I almost laughed. Dylan wanted the world to see me as frail, forgetful, incapable of surviving on my own. But here I was, alone in a blizzard, steady as ever. If anyone needed proof of competence, I was living it in real time. When the storm calmed, I checked my phone. A voicemail notification blinked. I pressed play. Sloane's voice filled the cabin, smooth and venomous. "This would all be easier if you weren't so stubborn, Nora. Dylan's only trying to protect you. The papers are filed. The buyers are lined up. One way or another, you're not going to be stuck in that old place forever. So why not make it pleasant?" I replayed it twice, recording it onto Patrice's little voice device. My hands shook not from fear, but from fury. They weren't hiding anymore. They were telling me flat out that my life, my independence, my dignity were negotiable to them. And the negotiation was over. I sat back in Cal's rocker storm clouds clearing outside the window and thought about all the patience I'd once carried from wreckage. You learn something when you're the one pulling people from crumpled cars and smoke-filled rooms. Panic never saves anyone. Action does. The squeeze was on, no doubt about it. My bank account frozen, my reputation questioned, my home treated like a commodity already on the market. They were trying to crush me, but they'd forgotten one thing: pressure doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it forges, and I was just getting started. The letter came on a Tuesday. Heavy paper county seal stamped in blue. Inside, in neat bureaucratic type: "Public hearing scheduled. Zoning Board of Gunnison County. Petition to approve short-term rental permit and property transfer for parcel 047B Hummingbird Ridge." My name wasn't anywhere on the petition. Just Beckett Family Holdings, LLC. For a moment, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the notice, the generator still humming faintly from last night's storm. They weren't just trying to steal my house anymore. They were trying to convert it, flip it into an Airbnb or worse, before I was even gone. I folded the paper, carefully smoothed the creases, and placed it beneath Cal's fireman badge. "All right, love," I whispered to the brass. "Let's finish this." The day of the hearing, the town felt different. Pine Ridge is small. News travels quicker than the wind off the reservoir. Folks knew something was brewing. Outside the courthouse, a squat brick building with peeling white trim neighbors milled about, whispering, casting me sympathetic glances. Some avoided my eyes, afraid to take sides. Patrice met me at the steps, her briefcase swinging like a weapon. "You ready?" she asked. "I've been ready for weeks," I said. Arturo was already inside, maps rolled under his arm, and tab jeans tucked into scuffed boots carried a laptop plastered with stickers. My unlikely cavalry. Inside the chamber, the zoning board sat behind a long table, 5 members in mismatched blazers and cardigans. A flag drooped behind them, the kind of small-town scene that looks harmless until you realize how much power sits in those chairs. Across the aisle, Dylan wore a tailored suit, hair slicked back, smiling like a man who thought the check had already cleared. Beside him, Sloane scrolled her phone, nails clicking. Their attorney, a young man too polished for this town, shuffled papers with smug precision. The board chair cleared his throat. We are here to consider the petition of Beckett Family Holdings, LLC for approval of property transfer and short-term rental permit. I felt every eye in the room slide to me, the old woman in a navy coat, pearls at her throat spine, stiff against the folding chair. Underdog, maybe, but not unarmed. The attorney launched into his performance. He spoke of safety, of family responsibility, of how Dylan had stepped in to assist his aging mother, whose confusion and isolation made independent living unwise. He waved the forged quitclaim like it was gospel. He only wants what's best for her, the lawyer said smoothly. This permit is the logical next step, ensuring the property generates income rather than falling into neglect. I gripped the recorder in my pocket, knuckles white. Let him finish, Patrice had said. Let him dig his own hole. When it was our turn, Patrice rose slowly. She didn't posture, didn't smile. She simply placed a neat stack of folders on the board's table. Members of the board, she began, voice steady. What you've just heard is not care. It is calculated exploitation, and we intend to prove it. She called Tab first. The girl walked to the projector plugged in her laptop, and with a few clicks, the screen filled with audit logs. This is the electronic signature data from the supposed deed transfer, Tab explained, her voice clear. Each digital signature records a time and IP address and a device fingerprint. As you can see, the Nora Beckett signature was executed at 2:14 p.m. on March 7th from a Salon Wi-Fi in downtown Denver. That account is registered to Sloan Beckett. Gasps rippled across the room. Sloane's head jerked up, her screen still glowing in her hands. Dylan shifted in his seat, jaw tightening. Furthermore, Tab continued clicking again. The device fingerprint shows the same MacBook that logged into Sloane's Instagram account 5 minutes earlier. The signature is a fraud. The board members leaned forward, murmuring. Patrice nodded to Arturo. He spread his survey map across the table, yellowed paper stretching end to end. This is the original subdivision plat filed 1983, he explained. Note the conservation overlay. Lot 47B, Mrs. Beckett's parcel, was listed provisional for a conservation easement. And here he tapped a stamp in faded ink. We found the easement was finalized in 1985. Recorded, binding, and permanent. The attorney scoffed. That was decades ago. Irrelevant. Not irrelevant, Arturo shot back. Binding. A perpetual conservation easement granting Mrs. Beckett a life estate. Which means no transfer, no short-term rental permit, no LLC sale without her express living consent. This cabin cannot legally be flipped. Period. The room erupted in whispers. Someone in the back clapped once before falling silent. Then Patrice pressed play on the recorder. Sloane's voicemail spilled into the chamber. This would all be easier if you weren't so stubborn, Nora. Dylan's only trying to protect you. The buyers are lined up. One way or another, you're not going to be stuck in that old place forever. The words hung like smoke. The board members stared at Dylan, whose face flushed crimson. Sloane muttered something under her breath, eyes darting around for escape. Finally, Patrice delivered the blow. She handed over the emergency injunction already granted by a district judge, freezing all transactions tied to my property. Any attempt to proceed, she said, will not only be void, but criminal. Silence. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. The board chair adjusted his glasses. Based on the evidence presented, fraudulent signature recorded easement, and the voicemail, we find no grounds to approve this petition. Furthermore, we refer this matter to the district attorney for investigation into potential elder financial exploitation. The gavel struck wood, decision sealed. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then I exhaled slow and deep, the air leaving me like a storm finally passed. Dylan stood abruptly, his chair scraping. Mom, he started, voice softer than I'd heard in months. We can talk about this. I met his eyes steady. We talked. You chose theft. Now you'll live with that. He opened his mouth, but the deputy had already stepped forward, serving a notice into Sloane's trembling hands. Fraud investigation. Her nails clicked against the paper as she clutched it. I gathered my coat, Arturo's map, Tab's laptop cord, trailing Patrice's folders, snapping shut. We walked out together into the crisp mountain air. The sun was brighter than I remembered. The sky stretched wide and blue, and the murmurs of the crowd followed me, not whispers of doubt anymore, but of respect. That night, back at the cabin, I lit the lamp and set the recorder on the table. I ran my fingers over the easement deed Arturo had unearthed over the neat lines of Cal's old map. They had underestimated me because of my age, because of my quiet. But quiet doesn't mean weak. Quiet means patient. Quiet means you know when to strike. And strike I had. The morning after the zoning hearing, the mountains felt quieter. Not silent, the jays still shrieked, the lake still whispered, but quieter in the way a battlefield settles after the last cannon. I brewed coffee stronger than usual and sat at the table where Cal's badge and Arturo's map still lay. For weeks, I'd woken with dread. That day, I woke with something else. Resolve. It didn't take long for the ripples to spread. By Thursday, Patrice called. Guardianship petition withdrawn. Dylan's lawyer filed the notice this morning. Her tone was clipped professional, but I could hear the satisfaction under it. The DA is officially investigating financial exploitation. It's going to get messy for them. I thanked her, hung up, and let the words sink in. Petition withdrawn. No one else's hand hovering over my bank account. No stranger poking through my fridge under the guise of wellness. Just me free to write my checks and buy my groceries. Such a small thing, yet it felt like the biggest victory of all. The next week, I learned Dylan had been suspended from his job. Conflict of interest, the HR email leaked around town said. His name attached to a fraudulent LLC hadn't sat well with the company. Folks whispered it in line at the diner, shaking their heads. Sloane's realtor license was flagged pending the fraud investigation. Her glossy smile no longer beamed from the brochures in the grocery store. Justice has a strange flavor. It isn't sweet exactly. More like bitter coffee after a sleepless night, strong, necessary steadying. Still, consequences don't erase blood ties. And blood ties, no matter how frayed, tug at you. 2 weeks later, Dylan showed up at the cabin. He didn't knock. He just stood at the edge of the porch, hands jammed in his pockets like a boy who'd broken a window. His eyes darted to the new security camera I'd had installed above the door, then back to me. "Mom," he said, voice rough, I screwed up." I kept my distance, one hand resting on the porch railing. "That's one way to put it." "I thought I was protecting you," he mumbled. "We were drowning in debt. Sloane said it would solve everything. And I let her talk me into it." The wind rustled through the aspens, filling the space where his apology should have landed. "Do you know what you took from me?" I asked quietly. "Not just the house. You made me look like a burden, like a problem to be solved, instead of a mother to be trusted. That's worse than theft." He swallowed, eyes wet. "I don't know how to fix this." I steadied my voice. "You can't. Some things don't get fixed. They get remembered. And they change what comes after." We stood there, silence yawning between us. Finally, I said, "From now on, Dylan, my boundaries aren't negotiable. No access to my finances, no decisions about my life without my voice. If you want a relationship, it will be on those terms. If not, then it won't be at all." He nodded once, like a man signing a contract he didn't want but couldn't fight. Then he turned, shoulders slumped, and walked back to his car. I didn't cry. Not then. The tears had dried weeks ago. All that remained was the firm line I'd drawn in the dirt and the quiet relief of knowing I could hold it. In the days that followed, I set about rebuilding not just my defenses, but my peace. I met with Patrice again and rewrote my estate plan. On the last page in bold letters sat what I called the Beckett clause. Any individual who attempts guardianship without consent or demonstrates coercion shall be barred from inheritance and authority over personal affairs. Clear, ironclad, unshakable. I called the locksmith again, had every lock changed to mechanical deadbolts only I controlled. I kept the smart lock in a drawer as a reminder. Convenience is a poor trade for control. I installed a camera at the drive entrance, one at the porch, one at the shed. Not because I expected Dylan to come skulking back, but because it felt good to see the red light wink at me, proof that someone was watching out for me this time, even if it was just a lens. Arturo came by on a Saturday with seedlings in cardboard boxes. "Figured you could use a garden again?" he said, dropping basil and thyme into my hands. Together, we planted them out, back our boots sinking into thawed soil. "Funny thing about plants," he murmured. "You prune them hard, they grow back stronger." I smiled, dirt under my nails, sunlight warm on my neck. He wasn't wrong. Word spread through Pine Ridge. People I hadn't seen in months began stopping me in the post office, murmuring support. Doris left a jar of strawberry jam on my porch with a note, "Proud of you." The librarian slipped me a copy of a mystery novel and whispered, "You showed them, Nora." One afternoon, the fire chief, Cal's old colleague, asked if I'd lead a workshop at town hall. "We've got other seniors getting letters, calls, weird contracts they don't understand. They're scared. But after what you pulled off, they'll listen to you." So I did. I stood in front of 24 neighbors, clutching a folder of tips. Patrice helped me write how to secure your deed, how to verify signatures, how to set up alerts on your accounts. My hands shook at first, but when I looked out and saw the faces lined with years, some tearful, some fierce, I steadied. "This isn't just about money," I told them. "It's about dignity, about not letting anyone erase you while you're still breathing. If they try, you fight. And you don't have to fight alone." Applause filled the room. I felt my cheeks flush, not with embarrassment this time, but with pride. That night alone on my porch, I watched the sun sink behind the ridge. The cabin glowed in its light, sturdy as ever. I thought of Dylan, of the boy who once begged me to check for monsters under his bed. I thought of the man who had tried to paint me as the monster, now confused, incapable, disposable. Maybe he'd find his way back someday. Maybe he wouldn't. Either way, I had drawn my line. And standing there, coffee warm in my hands, the cameras humming softly at the porch, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time: safety. Not because the threats were gone, they never truly vanish, but because I knew I had the strength to face them. Spring came slow to the mountains that year. Snowmelt trickled down the ridge, feeding the reservoir, until it shimmered like a mirror. The cabin smelled of soil again, basil and thyme sprouting in the boxes. Arturo and I planted tomatoes, taking root in their beds. Each morning, I slipped on Cal's old flannel, carried my coffee out to the porch, and listened to the birds tuning the day awake. For the first time in months, I wasn't listening for knocks I dreaded or cars crunching gravel that shouldn't be there. I was listening for life itself, the steady rhythm of a world that had kept turning even while mine had been thrown into chaos. Neighbors came by more often now, not out of curiosity, but out of kinship. Doris brought me strawberry jam again. The librarian left books by the gate when she knew I was too tired to stop by. And some evenings, Arturo sat with me on the porch, the two of us watching the light stretch long across the water. We didn't talk about lawsuits or hearings, just fishing spots, weather patterns. The kind of talk that feels ordinary but carries a weight of healing. One morning, I walked room to room in the cabin, touching the things I had almost lost. The quilt Cal's sister had made, faded but warm. The shadow box where I'd finally placed his fireman's badge with a brass plate engraved kept. The survey map Arturo found framed on the wall, now its lines a reminder that this land was always more than paper, it was promise. I paused at the kitchen table, running my fingers over the wood grain scarred by years of meals and spilled coffee. This was where I had stared down forged signatures, where I had whispered to myself, "Not me, not now, not ever." And now, it was where I wrote letters, balanced my checkbook, and drafted flyers for another senior workshop at Town Hall. Sometimes people ask me quietly if I've forgiven Dylan. Forgiveness is a complicated word. What I know is this: I've released the hold his betrayal had on me. I don't wake up angry anymore, but I haven't forgotten. Forgetting is not the same as peace. Peace is knowing you stood your ground. Peace is living in the home they tried to erase you from, sipping coffee from the same chipped mug and smiling simply because you can. At 74, peace is not silence. It is not surrender. It is the steady hum of your own voice saying, "I matter. I remain." One evening, as the sun dipped low, I pinned another flyer to the community board, "Protect Your Home, Protect Yourself Free Workshop" by Nora Beckett. As I stepped back, a younger woman tapped my arm. "I heard what you did," she said softly. "My brother's been pushing me to sign over my land. I thought I didn't have a chance. But you showed me I can fight." I smiled at her, the kind of smile that comes from surviving something that could have ended differently. "You can," I told her. "And you don't have to fight alone." Later that night, I sat on the porch with the radio scanner humming faintly, picking up distant EMT chatter. A voice called out about a traffic accident on Route 50. For a moment, it pulled me back, sirens flashing lights, urgency. But instead of grief, I felt gratitude. I had lived enough to carry those memories, to learn from them, and still be here to breathe in the mountain air. The stars came out one by one, mirrored in the reservoir. I wrapped Cal's flannel tighter and let myself smile into the dark. Because in the end, peace isn't found in winning or losing court hearings. It isn't found in punishing those who wronged you. Peace is found in choosing yourself over and over, no matter who tries to write you out of your own story. And as long as I have breath, my story is mine to tell. In the end, Nora's story reminds us of something many of us know, but sometimes forget. Age does not erase our right to dignity, to independence, or to be heard. Too often, older adults in America are treated as fragile or invisible, their choices second-guessed by the very people who should honor them most. But this story shows that even when betrayal comes from within the family, we still have the power to stand firm, to protect what we've built, and to draw clear boundaries. Strength in later years doesn't always come from physical force. It comes from memory, resilience, and the courage to say, "I matter, and my story isn't over." For anyone watching who has felt overlooked, pressured, or erased, let Nora's fight be a gentle reminder: you are not helpless. There are allies out there, tools you can use, and a voice inside you that still carries weight. Protecting your home, your choices, and your peace is not selfish, it's necessary. And it's never too late to stand up and claim them. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who might need the encouragement. Leave your thoughts below. Your words might be the very thing another person needs to hear tonight. Wishing you strength, peace, and the comfort of knowing you are never too old to stand your ground.